Hello, Rebel Witches. Welcome to the fourth or fifth episode? I can't remember, but I have a very special guest here today, Ariel Delurey. I said the right name, right? I always panic when I say the last name. My friend Ariel, who is a spiritual teacher, a shadow work guide, and a paranormal investigator. And I'm so excited to chat today. We're going to talk all things paranormal and shadow work. So Ariel, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So Ariel, have we known each other since 2021? When did we first connect?
Yeah, I think it was around there, definitely. And I just remember finding your page and just falling in love with what you're doing and your energy. So yeah, now we're here a couple years later.
It's so cool. I love having all my internet friends come on the show. And we've worked together in the past, and it's just so fun to see both of our journeys continue on. And I just had to ask Ariel to be on the show today because she keeps posting about how she's teaching these paranormal classes. And I'm like, Ariel, I didn't know you're a paranormal investigator. So I kind of want to start with that and ask you, how did that come about? How did you get into the paranormal beyond just I don't know. I think a lot of listeners could probably relate. I love listening to podcasts, watching the TikToks, but how did you get into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny that you brought up that I'm posting about it because I never thought to share it with my community, and it's such a huge part of who I am. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to start sharing about it because when I got into it, it was so taboo that people were really scared of paranormal investigation, and they would kind of be I would always get warnings oh, be careful, and I'm like, I love it. I'm going to keep, doing it. So I really am excited to bring it into the community. But how I got into it really was ever since I was a child. I was always into horror movies, just ghosts, spirits, all of that. But I was of the belief, probably many of you listeners, that you either were born psychic or you just didn't have it, right? So I always had this desire to experience the other side, let's say, but I just thought, oh, well, I'm not psychic, so I guess I'll just do it this other way. And I started finding paranormal events, ghost hunts, ghost tours, that sort of thing. But also as a child, I just obsessively looked online at ghost stories. I don't know why, I felt a thrill in being a little bit scared.
Oh my God, I was gonna say, weren't you scared? I was so scared as a kid. Couldn't take it.
Scared but excited. The way that I describe paranormal investigations when things actually manifest in front of your eyes is that it's terrifying but exhilarating at the same time. It's an adrenaline rush. You're I need more. I just need to experience more.
So you're a thrill seeker a little bit. This is your medium through which you're a thrill seeker.
Yes, definitely. But yeah, so I was a kid, I was super into it, and then I just started finding. First it was ghost tours, those tours that take you around and they show you a allegedly haunted location, but you don't really do an investigation. You just kind of learn about it. And then I started wanting to take it a step further. And then I started actually doing investigations. And now I host a few of my own investigations with my own team. It's really just me and my friends, so it's not a team, of two. But we're trying to do our own as opposed to paying and going somewhere where they're hosting it. But yeah, I've been to so many places. I've got a lot of stories for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Because I did see this was a while ago, but you made a vlog about going to a haunted Airbnb. And so I'm curious, when you go do something like that, what's the setup? Do you use certain tools or things? I obviously you're psychic, so you can tune in that way too, but is there other things you bring with you? What's the setup when you go into an investigation? I'm super curious.
Yeah. So I do have a video, if anyone's interested. We've got a YouTube channel called Boo Babes where we are uploading some videos on paranormal investigating. But yes, and I'm looking over here because I literally have the tools. I have the tools beside me because I was maybe Sadie will want to see them.
Show us.
Yes. So yes, basically the setup. I try to go in with out learning anything about the history of the place because I want anything that I'm getting psychically or otherwise to be really to not be skewed in any way by my knowledge that I already have. So I go in, I bring my tools. Some of them are stationary, so we just choose a place to set them up, and they often make noise. So we'll know if like something walks by. It'll make a little bit more sense when I actually show you them. Do you want me to show you some right now?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Because this is video and audio. So anyone watching the video, we can see.
Okay, perfect. So I have here what's called an EMF meter. Some people may actually be really familiar with this, but basically it's an electromagnetic field meter. And these are actually like used. I think it's like electricians. They take them into houses. They'll like scan the walls and stuff to see wiring. So this is a really good baseline, because basically what I'll do, like when you go into old houses, you don't know where the wiring is. You don't know like what the setup is like. It's historic, like it's not like today's standards, but essentially you go in here. This has like a light that you can see lighting up. It's kind of basically when it goes to red, it means like something's came into the energy field. So what I'll do first when I go into an investigation is take this around the location to see, am I getting any spikes already? So that if I'm in that area and I get a spike, then I know, okay, it wasn't a spirit, potentially it was actually already here. So it's kind of like a baseline test. Yeah, but you can also use this to communicate by like walking around holding it, and then if you see it go off, by saying, if that was you, spirit, like, can you make it go up to red again, or can you come closer? And if it responds, then you've got like an intelligent, communication happening, which is really cool.
I have chills.
Yeah.
You're so cool.
Thank you.
Like, I want to... if you host a ghost hunting retreat in a haunted Airbnb, like, I will sign up. I'll be there.
Oh my God, I would love that. Like, literally, that is a future goal for sure.
That would be so cool.
Yeah, right? It would be so much fun. Like I said, I get like a thrill. I am the person where if you hear a noise, like I'm running towards it, whereas other people are like running away from it.
I'm running away for sure. Like, you would have to like hold my hand the entire time I'm there, but I want to be there, but I will act like I don't.
Well, it's so funny because, like, I remember I went to one and it was pretty intense. Like, a lot of activity was happening. And I walked into a room with, like, a music box that started going off on its own. And the one friend I was with, she's like, I'm out, and literally ran. And I was like, no, stay with me. So,
yeah, I'd be like, that was enough for me. I'm out.
No, like, no, I need to investigate further. I just, like, love it. It's such a thrill, honestly. But yeah, this is a really well-known tool, because it's just like, it's handheld, it's easy, it's relatively affordable. So a lot of people will bring that in to investigations, but I've got many others as well.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. What else do you use?
Yeah, so something else you can use is just a typical recorder. Like this, you can also just use your phone. This is just a recorder, but it's to record like EVPs. If anyone's familiar with that, it's called electronic voice phenomenon. So basically it's believed that spirits operate on a different frequency than us. So if they're trying to speak to us, we may not be able to hear it with our ears. But if we record it, then when you play it back, you may be able to capture pieces of what they're saying. I don't have any EVPs to show you guys, but like if you look online, there are some really compelling ones where you can hear it clearly and you're just like, okay, that's really creepy. I've definitely captured some myself. But it's funny because when I did my last masterclass on paranormal, I tried to play it, but it was just too low. Like I need some type of like technology to change the frequency level so that I can bring out that audio a bit more, but I don't have that right now. But it's really cool capturing EVPs. So that's something that anyone can do just with their iPhone, with a recorder, anything. Another really cool one though, one of my favorites, is called a spirit box. So it looks like this for anybody that's watching. And basically what this does is it's a little box that is almost like a radio that's been altered so that it frequently, like continuously scans the radio stations, both AM and FM. So instead of similar to a radio where you find a station and you leave it on there and you listen to your music, this actually will be scanning like over and over and over. And the theory behind this is that when you ask a question, the spirit will be able to utilize these wavelengths, like these sound frequencies, to like say a word or a phrase. So you can also use spirit boxes though, like on an app. I remember one time I was in a haunted location in the States actually, and because I'm from Canada, y'all. Anyway, so I was in the States at a haunted location. It's called the Hinsdale House, if anyone's familiar with that. But basically they had an app on their phone instead of an actual spirit box. And I was sitting in this really haunted room, and the person looked at me and they're like, I want you to think of a 2-syllable word. And the only word I could think of, which is kind of funny, is kitty, and literally 2 seconds later, right away, 2 seconds later, that app said kitty. And I'm like, okay, there's literally no way that app would have just randomly said kitty, right? So like they're utilizing the technology to interact with us, which is really just amazing.
Wow. I forgot like what the spirit box specifically did. So thank you for that explanation. But for a while, my algorithm on TikTok was bringing me all of these spirit box videos where I don't remember like what they called it, but basically someone would put noise canceling headphones on connected to the radio. And then, so they wouldn't hear the questions being asked. And then somebody would ask a question, and then they would just be focused on listening to the static and saying any words that they heard. But they can't hear the questions being asked, right? And it was just amazing. They were having conversations, but like I was like, that is so cool. I want to do that.
Yes, and it's funny that you bring that up because I was going to mention that next. So that's called the Estes method, and that's
Yes.
exactly
Okay.
what you described is like putting blindfold on and headphones, having the spirit box connected, and then the other people in the room asking you the questions and then you just answering. So I tried that for the first time actually last year, and it was pretty overwhelming because you have these noise canceling headphones on. It's really loud and it's very disorienting. Like I felt like there was like 12 people like screaming in my ear like all at the same time, and I felt like my world was like spinning. And it's a really interesting experience. And yeah, right. And my friend and I, when we stayed at the haunted Airbnb, we did that method and we actually were getting like intelligent responses, which was really cool. So when you can listen back to it, like if you've recorded it, it's really just interesting to see like what came through and what was said because you had no idea what you were being asked. You were just like blurting out what you were hearing.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of times like the words you're coming through are really short, but like it always connected. It always made, like when I was watching these TikToks, I was like, God, that is incredible. Like it's genius the way we come up with, you know, talking to spirits. Okay. I'm super curious then when it comes to, because you have these sort of like scientific methods, we'll say, to get like tangible like evidence and like sort of like coincide, but I'm curious as someone who is very connected to the spirit world, as a, you know, as a intuitive guide, as a psychic, like what does it feel like going into these situations, and what are ways that you kind of like you're being in this the spiritual world, like what are ways that you like protect your energy, or do you set like certain intentions, like being so sensitive and so open naturally, like how do you like go into these, and what does it feel like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, especially because when I first started, I didn't have any, like, I wasn't open in my abilities and my psychic abilities. So I would get really impacted, but it would actually be like, I would go into a really haunted space and I would feel really sick or really weak. Like I would actually feel like lightheaded, like that was happening to me, or I would feel like an overwhelm of emotion and I wasn't sure why. But now, of course, I understand like why I was picking up on the energy and feeling it. So when I go into places now, sometimes I'll carry with me like a black obsidian crystal, anything black, you know, really protective.
Totally.
But more than that too, I will typically set the intention that, okay, so I'm a little bit different. I am open to like connecting with anything that wants to connect. So I don't really go in being like only the highest vibrational, because I understand that maybe not everything in that location where there's been horrible, horrible things may be of the highest vibration. So I kind of go in and I say, you know, I'm open to connecting with anything that wants to connect with me here, only in this space. Once I leave, that connection is no longer, like I'll say something along those lines to still protect myself. I'll also go in and like picture, you know, a bubble of light around me, just kind of protecting so that my energy is not being like penetrated in that way. However, sometimes like our bodies are our greatest tool. So sometimes if we block ourselves off too much, we can't pick up on those subtleties, like, you know, the feeling sick or the feeling lightheaded. It's not comfortable, but it lets me know that like something's around or I'm experiencing something. But that's just me. If anyone is very like uncomfortable with having those feelings, then I would set further protections. But I'm always like, I'm here for it. I want to experience it all, you know? And then I just trust that nothing's going to follow me home. But like I have actually had experiences where I did have like something follow me home. So.
Oh my God. Okay. So what did you do in that situation?
Oh, well, it's interesting because this was actually when we went to the haunted Airbnb. My friend and I, we both, like once we came home, we would start experiencing little things, like something would just randomly fall over and I would call her or text her and I'd be like, something happened to me tonight. And she'd be like, something happened to me too. And it was always on the exact same day that something happened to us. So her and I actually came together and we did a little ritual where we just like visualized like closing the door. We stated out loud, like, you know, we're not wanting anything to connect in our physical homes. We cleansed ourselves, and then we didn't didn't experience anything after that. So we are so powerful as energetic beings that we can close ourselves off, but we never set that intention like when we were there. We did in terms of connecting, but we didn't really cleanse or do anything when we left. So we kind of left the door a little open. So if anyone does have anything follow them home, know that you have the power to close it off. But it can be scary. Like I totally can understand that and see that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, it's interesting because it really is as simple as just like speaking your boundaries and speaking your intention and like having some crystals, doing a ritual, but like you have to be so mindful of the way you are speaking because there are these sort of like trickster spirits that are like, well, she said it this way, not this way, so I can still, so it's like we kind of have to just be like kind of like clever and make sure we cover all of our bases. And I love what you said about, like going into a spirit that hasn't crossed over probably isn't like pure love vibrational energy. They're probably still here. You've had all the construction around me right now. I don't know. I'm like, I try to schedule these early and they start so early. Anyways, but, they probably haven't crossed over because they have like unfinished business. They've had their own traumas. They've had, there's some struggle. So it's not gonna be like energy of the highest good, pure love energy. So being able to be mindful of that and like still open to it, I think that's really powerful and a really good point. And it's just like, you just have to, be aware of how you're feeling, set your boundaries, be very clear, very specific, and that just like energetic spiritual hygiene when you leave of like, okay, you're staying here, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes I'll even when I come home from an investigation, just kind of like, unless I have a shower, but if I'm not feeling like having a shower, I'll just kind of like wash my hands, visualize everything kind of like draining down the drain. Because we do carry these things, right? Like we're all energy. We're going to be imprinted and impacted. But like you said, having those boundaries is so important. And I think what happened with us in particular, because like we did set the intention when we got there before the investigation, but then at the end of the night, we're like, oh, let's take some pictures like with the Ouija board and stuff. So we're moving it around, but we're not actively like, oh, let's use it, but we're moving it around. So we, just doing that alone is like inviting in connection. And we didn't close the session because we weren't doing it, right? So thinking back, I'm like, oh, that probably opened us further to like being impacted when we went home. So other, tip for spirit boards, always say goodbye when you're done.
Oh my gosh. So I'm super curious, like what's your like, if I had to pick one story, the best story I have, like share it with us. I want to know.
Okay. So, I mean, I've got a lot, but this one definitely like impacted me, like was just really intense. So I actually go to these seances every year. They're hosted by somebody I know. If you're in like the Toronto, Ontario area and you're interested, the seance is called James White Seance, but it's just like the most amazing thing I've ever been to. But anyway, so we were sitting in a circle and like where I was sitting, I had my back to like an open door and it's like dark. We're all sitting in silence, holding hands. Like the way that these seances work is you kind of go around it's a historic place always with a lot of usually like horrible things have happened there. But anyway, you go around, you learn a little bit about it. You can explore by yourself and then you come together in circle for a seance. So the individual who hosts them, he'll kind of be like really calling to the spirits, trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? He'll just be trying to like provoke them. He'll be trying to provoke them more and more. And he'll get everybody's energy collectively to like invite them in. So we got to the point where like this spirit was like really being active. And we heard like the first thing that happened is I'm holding hands, right? And he says like, do not break the circle. Like no matter what happens, don't break the circle. And we're holding hands. And then he's calling to the spirits. We're hearing knocks like from over here. Then a piano plays like over here, like just like it's done, and then all of a sudden this massive bang happens like right behind me. And again, it's dark. I didn't know what it was. And all I feel is like this cold wind like hit my back for the rest of the time. And I'm just like terrified, but also super excited, I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. I'm like crying, like this is so cool. But so that was like probably the most intense, but I've also seen in seances as well, I've seen that so basically, first I should tell you what was behind me. It was a big wooden chair that like fell down that wouldn't have been able to just like fall by itself, right? And like this is also a place that is so creaky that if somebody was in there, let's say trying to like play tricks, you would hear them walking around because when you're in there, you can hear like everybody walking because it's like historic. It's a historical building. But yeah, when we turned on the lights and that chair was behind me, I was like, that was wild, especially because the cold wind that was just on my back after that too. It like
Oh my
stayed there. Yeah.
gosh.
So that's like a really intense one. But I can tell you my like first experience ever like seeing
Yeah.
an apparition. So I was at my friend's house and I was probably like 12, maybe a little bit older. And we were walking down the hall. And when you turn the corner, there's two doors, one to the bathroom or one to the basement. And she's like, I'm just going to go to the bathroom. And as like a young child, I'm like, okay, well, I'll just follow you and wait outside, you know? And then when I went there, when I turned the corner, I looked downstairs, like where the doorway was to go to the stairs. And there was a girl like walking down the stairs. And then she turned the corner. And I was like, oh, that's my friend. She must go downstairs. So I should follow her. So I get to the bottom of the
This is
stairs.
the
And my
start
friend,
of a scary movie.
yeah, like I get to the bottom of the stairs and my friend calls my name from the top. She's like, Ariel. And I looked back. I was like, that wasn't you. Like, what the? And like, literally. So that was the first time I ever saw like a spirit. And that one stuck with me too.
Oh. Did you tell your friend, like, I saw something? Like, did you tell her that? And did you process it that, like, it was, like, a spirit? Or were you just not sure as a kid?
So I did process it just because I was kind of like, because I was freaked out. Like when I told her, I was like, I just saw someone. So then she came down and she's like, okay, well, let's look and see. And we kind of turned the corner, went and explored the basement and there was nothing there. So naturally I was like, because I was already like into that stuff anyway. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just a spirit, but like, what the heck?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, I was like, because I haven't done a lot of, like, I'm pretty scared. So I'm like, I haven't gone on a lot of haunted places. I went on like a walking ghost tour in New Orleans and I went to like a haunted house in San Diego. But like I've never really had like at least as an adult, like really like clear, obvious, like paranormal situations. Like I'm psychic, so I definitely pick up on stuff, but nothing like tangible where like I've seen it with my eyes other than maybe like things in the corner of my eyes where you just kind of convince yourself like I don't know if that was something kind of thing. But when I was a kid, and you know, I always say like, I wasn't psychic growing up. I became psychic later in life. But then I kind of think about my childhood more because I was always so scared. I was always terrified, especially at night. Like I was so scared of the dark. And I constantly felt, you know, to me, monsters. Like, I constantly felt the presence of things around me. And I would lay in my bed, like, still, like, afraid to breathe. And I don't know what would have been in the houses I grew up in, but I was always just, like, suffocated by how much I felt at night and how scared I was. And there were times where I remember, like, my thing is like at night, like I can't, like the blinds have to be closed before sunset because as a child, multiple times I would look outside and see something go down, like something was in my window and going down, but it wasn't human. It wasn't somebody looking through my window. It had like, to me, it had like red eyes and it was not good. And again, this is me as like a very young child, so I don't know if this is my imagination. I don't know, but it scared the shit out of me. And I'd always be like, "Mom, I'm not going into my room until you close my blinds." And she had to have them perfect, no cracks, because I saw this multiple times at this one house we lived in. So it's like I don't know, like why there would be scary things around me. I'm curious, like the house we lived in around that age where I was the most scared. Like if any. I would be curious to talk to other homeowners if anybody else ever felt stuff. And then when we moved into our next house, like I was still always really scared, but I don't know if that was just trauma from the first house and I kind of like took that with me. I don't know, but like as a kid, like I don't know, I just felt stuff a lot. But I just thought I was like a scaredy cat. I just thought I was like, you know, I was like, oh, that's just me. I'm bad. I'm always scared, kind of thing. I'm like, I don't know what that was.
I mean, children are so perceptive and they can see so much more than we can because, you know, they don't have the conditioning that we have. They don't have all of the things that we need to like sift through before we can open up those abilities. So it could very well be that, you know, something sensed that you were like open and was just kind of like peeking in to see. But that would be terrifying, like literally terrifying.
My poor parents, like, because I never explained why I was so scared, because it would make it real, I think. But I was always just like, you have to close the blinds. There's a crack. I can see it. And like, I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to sleep with my light fully on. I didn't want the lights to go, because that's when like I felt the bad energy. I was scared, and it was just like that's common with kids, but at the same time, is that because kids, we're not that far away from the spirit world. We just came into this world, even from like 0 to 7, we're only subconscious. We don't have the conscious ego mind yet. So we're very, very like perceptive of everything. So it's interesting. Like, I don't know, but at the same time, I'm like, I think maybe there was something going on in that house. Like, I couldn't go in the basement by myself. That basement was terrifying. So I don't know, but kid stuff or spirits, we'll never know for sure. But maybe we should go investigate that house.
Yeah, no, definitely, I would be down. It'd be interesting to find out if there is any history, like, from that property as well, because a lot of, what's actually really interesting to me is, like, a lot of these houses that you go into, it's always, like, old-timey spirits, right? Like, it's never, like, a modern, like, this person died in, 2000. Like, it's really, like, they were, like, 1980 or 1800s, like, always so long ago. So I don't know why that is, but maybe it's just because people haven't actually died in those locations, like, as it's gone, as it's continued on. But yeah, I'd be really interested about, like, that history, the land, like, what's gone on there to see if there's any, like, connections. It could also have been, like, a shadow figure. Was it, like, black? You said, like, red eyes.
And red eyes.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a demon, like, literally, like, their red eyes. I'm like,
It was really terrifying. Ugh. And it was never in the house. It was outside of the house.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that house, and I kind of like had this aha about as I got older, is so it was like the first house that my parents bought, and it was like kind of a fixer-upper. And it was totally like one of those houses where like I'm just gonna say, like, party people lived. There was holes in like doors from being like punched. We had to like scrub and paint the whole house because they would smoke inside the house, so all the walls were like yellow. There was like a full bar downstairs, and there's just like a lot of like it was like maybe people did drugs there, but it was just like a space where like there was a lot of like partying happening and fights and like things. So it could have been like a manifestation of like negative energy from that. And like my parents fixed it up. My room got painted pink. It was so nice. We turned it into a really nice house. But like, I remember like thinking like, oh, like my door has a hole in it. That's so strange. And my mom, explaining to me, and she always told me the truth. She was always real with me. But, she's like, yeah, the people that lived here before, they were throwing parties. That's how she explained it to me. So I don't know. It's interesting, but there definitely would have been a sort of vibe in that house before we lived there. So I don't know, it's interesting, but yeah, like that. And then I would convince myself, I'm like, oh, it's just like headlights from a car, but there was no house, there's no road in that direction or driveway in that direction.
Kind of reason, right?
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, it gives me the willies. But thankfully, when I go home, we don't live in that house anymore. But yeah, and I'm like, I don't know, like that's my paranormal story. I don't really have anything more than that, but I guess that's a pretty good one.
No, that is good. And I was gonna, like, as you started talking about the house, I was gonna say that too, that it could have been a manifestation of the negative energy, right? Like, that's perfect explanation, because I do think that energy can kind of take on forms in that way. Like, it can also impact us in the sense of like addictions and stuff like that sort of manifestation of negative energy. So, but yeah, that would be terrifying as a child for sure. The interesting thing about like apparitions, like, I wouldn't call that an apparition because it didn't look human, but the interesting thing about apparitions is oftentimes we actually don't understand that it was a spirit because it looks so real. So I've seen two in my life, the one little girl, and then when I was at an investigation, I saw somebody like walking down the stairs, and I like ran after them, and I went and looked, and I couldn't find this, person anywhere, and I kept thinking like, but it looked like a real person, like it looked like a real person. So then I did research, and I found out that like people often confuse it because they're not like smoky figures that are like, translucent like you see in like the movies. It's like a full-bodied human, it seems like. So it can mess with your mind.
Oh my gosh. I
Yeah.
have okay, you know it, like the trope in scary movies where there's always like the last girl and she's like the
Yeah.
one that survives even though she's gay. I feel like you're that character.
I would love to be that character.
You're like
Covered in
brave, you're like
blood.
going after it. You're like, I see a spirit, I'm running towards them, and you're constantly like, no, no, but like you always make it to the end of the movie. You're
Yes.
the last girl of the horror movie trope.
I love that vibe, and I will claim that. Yes,
I'm
literally.
just like, as you're saying that, I'm like, girl, I would never. I'd be like, that's an apparition. Other way, I'm cool. I saw it. I'm good.
Whenever I hear someone like telling me too about their like experiences in their house, and they're like terrified, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. And then they're like, no, it's not cool. It's scary. And I'm like, no, that's cool.
Cool, Ariel.
But I do say, I'm like, okay, I love haunted houses, like in places like that, but I wouldn't want my own house to be haunted. Because then you're like getting terrified every night, you know? I'd rather someone else's house be haunted.
Yeah, I did live in a haunted apartment, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, maybe I do have more experiences. I never saw anything in the apartment, but it was just me and one roommate, and like sometimes our stuff would be switched around, or like we would come downstairs and all the cupboard doors would be open, and like neither of us had a habit of like leaving cupboard doors open, and we'd kind of ask each other. And she lived there with a different roommate before, so when I moved in, she was like, yeah, I think we have a spirit, but like whenever like stuff starts happening, we just kind of say like, look, do your thing, just don't scare us, like don't spook us, like that's fine, you can hang out here, do your thing, you can be silly and move our stuff around, just don't scare us. And so it was never a problem, but it was funny because sometimes you'd be like, I didn't put that there, or like, you know, like it would just be like, I know like she would never leave all the cupboard doors open, but I come downstairs and they're all open, right? But we never like saw it, so it was kind of fun. It was like the best kind of haunting you could have because they were very respectful of our request to not scare us, but they would kind of like goof around a little bit, and it was never a problem.
You're like, I had fun with this one. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I have had like, it wasn't a haunted house, but I've had like a spirit in my house. Like I remember when I was in high school, I don't know why, I think I know what it's connected to, but like I was in high school and every time I would take a shower, like I would just, when I would close my eyes, I would just see this little boy like standing behind me, like so clear. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Unborn. It's a horror movie, but like the little boy from there, it literally looked exactly like that. And I would just see him every time I closed my eyes. And it was like terrifying because like you obviously have to close your eyes in the shower, you know, to shampoo and whatnot. And I also would see this like handprint on the mirror and I would like wipe it off and then it would like reappear. But I don't know, like he when I moved, he never came with, but I'm just like, man, he was creepy. Like that definitely stuck with me too.
Yeah, that feels scarier. I never anything like that. I also, so it's so funny as you get older, you realize how much you are just like exactly like, you think, oh, I'm so different from my family, and then you're like, I'm exactly the same as my family. My great aunt Penny is they live in like the Chicago area. I always think, like, I need to call her and ask her to tell me, or like literally have her on the podcast. But she's like a Reiki healer. She, you know, she's like very, very in the spirit world. And I remember being really young and us like at like a family reunion thing, and all the women kind of like sitting in one hotel room, like, you know, with like the two beds. We're all kind of gathered around great aunt Penny, and she's telling these like ghost stories, but she's so chill. And I remember like she just said like, oh yeah, like our church was auctioning off pews, and so I took one of these pews home, and she goes, but a little man came with it. And she's so chill, she's not scared at all. She's like, oh, and this little old man came with it. And sometimes when she's like, the church pew is in the basement, she's like, yeah, you know, sometimes I walk past the basement door and it's open, I just see him sitting in his pew down there. And I remember being a kid and being like, and you're not concerned about this? She was just like, it's fine. That was his church pew, and that's where he hung out, and he didn't cause any problems. But I just remember thinking, like, I've never met someone so nonchalant about a haunting in their home.
Yeah, literally. You're like, you weren't scared? What? And that's so true. Like, you can bring things home and it's funny because I literally used to look on eBay, like when I was younger, and be like, I want to find a haunted artifact. I'm glad I didn't, you know, because who knows what would have happened if you bring something like that into your house. But it's just like so fascinating. Like, I always had such fascination with all of those things.
Oh my God. Sometimes I end up on haunted doll TikTok and I get way too scared because I already have a thing about dolls. I just assume every doll is haunted until proved otherwise.
It's creepy.
Like, absolutely not. But I'm curious if you, so like whenever I go like not so much thrifting in like a Goodwill or something, but going to like an antique store, like a full on antique store where stuff is even older. I have come across a handful of times since being open and being psychic where I look at something and I go, oh, absolutely not. Like I know that there is something attached to it. Have you ever had an experience like that? Like when it's happened, like I'll just get like full body chills and there's just this, it's not that I see something, there's just this inner knowing where I'm like, don't touch that. Move on.
Yeah, or like at like museums. Like it's just so I
Yeah.
haven't had one at like a thrift store because honestly where I live there's like barely any thrift stores like
Yeah.
legit ones. Like I would love to go thrifting because I feel like there would be a lot of energy, but I've definitely been at
Yeah.
museums before where I'm just like I feel like something bad happened to this item. Or actually, this is a little bit different, but I was in Italy and I was at like a crypt. So basically, there's this
Oh.
crypt in Italy that it was like 400 or 4,000. I know that's a very different number, but monks, that amount of monks died,
Or
and
something.
yeah, something like that, 400 or 4,000, around that range. Um, they died and like all of their bones are like intricately displayed like in this crypt. So you go downstairs and you see all of their bones, like you literally see like bodies, and some of them aren't even fully decayed, so they still have like, yeah, because it's like underground, so it's been like preserving them. But anyway, I went there and I'm looking at this and I'm just like, I just felt like this overwhelming like sensation of sadness. And of course, you know, you might experience that just because of the energy that was really heavy.
Yeah.
So I get sort of feelings like that more so, where it's just like you said, like an inner knowing, right? Where you're just like, okay, no, like something is up with this item or this place. Because yeah, sometimes I'll walk into places and I'm just like feeling this overwhelming sense of energy and I'm like, okay, something feels off here. And I feel like
Yeah.
something happened here, like something, like it's a heaviness that you're
Yeah.
feeling. But yeah, I can imagine like going thrifting and even holding certain items, like feeling the energy of even just the
Yeah.
past owners that have like really loved this item.
Yeah. I feel like I get that with books. I love secondhand books. And I feel like sometimes as I'm reading them, I'll pick up on I got a secondhand Osho book and there was a couple underlines in pencil and stuff, just a little bit, but I had this overwhelming sense that the person that read it was this gentleman who was trying to connect with his daughter. And this book had nothing to do with being a parent, nothing to do with being a dad or daughter. It was like about joy or something. I don't know. But I felt like I could see this man. I felt like he was in his like 60s. I felt like his daughter was like probably like my age and recently interested in spiritual stuff. And he was like, I just like had this whole story built out, and it was, and you know, I can't verify that, but it was kind of fun. And that was like kind of a positive experience. It wasn't a ghost, it wasn't a spirit, but I just felt like, oh, like the person that read this before me, this is why they read it. This is their story. And it was kind of funny, but yeah. But it is
I
important,
love
anyone
that.
listening, cleanse your secondhand items.
Yes.
Don't cleanse them. I always just put them through some incense and I feel like that's good. Or I'll stick like I have it right here, my little like selenite crystal on my stuff. Even stuff you buy from the store, like that you're gonna use in your spiritual practice notebooks and stuff. But yeah. But
So
yeah,
true.
I feel like antique shopping or like, you know, thrifting has gotten more interesting. And it's not always. Sometimes it's mundane. I don't feel anything. But once in a while something comes through and I'm like, oh, so interesting.
Yes. Well, and I'd honestly love to get like antique furniture and things like that because I do feel like there is so much history there, and also things were just like made a little bit better back then.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right? But it's just even abandoned houses. Like I also have a pastime of going into abandoned houses. Like whenever I see one, I'm like, I want to explore this, you know? And sometimes you walk in there and you're just like, okay, like you just feel the energy. There's also a lot of like vandalization that happens in abandoned houses, and it's almost like you
Yeah.
feel this like chaotic energy. But one time I went into an abandoned house and like literally there was a picture of the family just on the mantle. And I was just like, okay, this is really creepy. Like what happened that they would like leave their
They
belongings
left
here
that.
and like leave, you know?
Yeah.
I did not take the picture because no, I don't want to take the picture. But it
Yeah.
was creepy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's this in my hometown we have the this history of just like an old school, like back in the day, those like really messed up mental hospitals, like psych
Mhm.
wards,
Yeah.
that it's shut down now. And but if you go into this one there's a barn. So they turned this hospital into like a working farm. So the patients had like something to do, I guess. And it's Wisconsin, so it gets, well, you're Canada, it gets really, really cold. So there was this underground tunnel from the hospital to the barn so that they could like go take care of the animals and stuff, I guess, when it was like really, really cold. I don't know. But people used to go into this tunnel because when the hospital got shut down, they put a bunch of stuff in that tunnel, like old like hospital beds and like chairs, and like they all had like restraints on them and stuff. This is a place where they used to do the like the horrible like electroshock therapies and stuff, just like old school, back in the day when they used to do these things. And they had all this equipment in this tunnel, and then eventually the tunnel collapsed, but you could still get into this barn. And everyone said, it's so haunted, this and that. And this is the epitome of me, because like my friends, this is a rite of passage in my hometown. Like once you can drive, you go to Norwood and you sneak in and you provoke the ghosts, right? And I didn't want to do this. I was like, no. I was so scared. But, my friends were like, well, you can stay in the car by yourself or you can come with the group into the barn, and both sounded equally terrifying. So I went in. And we went into the barn part. You couldn't get into the tunnel anymore, but you could still see that there was stuff stored in the barn. Some of the just like, you're like, whoa. And then my friend has a disposable camera, and she's just taking some pictures because we learned, you can see like orbs on film and stuff, or spirits. She takes all these disposable pictures. I'm just sitting by the entrance. I'm like, I don't like it in here. I'm feeling completely overwhelmed, terrified. My friends are it's not a big space. They're kind of like looking around more. And then my friend puts the disposable camera away and gets the digital camera, and she takes one picture. She looks at it, she screams, and then everybody runs out of the barn. Like, what? And like, we're in an old barn. It could have been dust, but also like it was in the far back corner where we weren't kicking up anything. So I don't know, but it was probably dust. But there's just a bunch of orbs like all in this one little corner. And so she sees the orbs, she screams, and we leave. And to this day, she's like, I never got that disposable camera film developed. I was too scared. And she doesn't know where it is now. But we talk about that all the time. We're like, I wonder if we would have gotten anything on the disposable camera. But it was so funny. And again, like the orbs very well could have been dust. We're in an old barn, but it was she just screams and we're all booking out of there. And she's like, let's go.
But orb photography is actually really cool, like when you can get, or spirit photography in general. Because, like pretty much what you should do when you are going into a place like that, obviously when you're with a disposable camera, it's a bit different. But when you have your iPhone, it's like, just take multiple. And if those orbs are in like every single one, then you might be able to say, okay, it was dust or it was bugs. But if they're not, then it's kind of like more easy to say, okay, it was an orb. But I choose to believe that it was spirits at that place.
Yeah. But I mean, you could just feel it in there, and it was a very sad, heavy energy. And that was before I kind of like, had opened up to spirituality and things like that. So, but yeah, that was just a funny memory. And I was like, I was right next to the door. I was ready to run whenever somebody screamed. And I was the first one out there.
And I'll be like, nope, going in. Well,
been like, we gotta go check all these orbs, see if it's real.
Literally, right? We gotta go try to find spirits. Let's break out the spirit board. Let's get all the tools. But you brought up like you said old asylum, right? Like a psych ward. So I like a few years back went to Rolling Hills Asylum. If you're familiar with that, it's in Bethany, New York, and it's like literally this massive asylum. They claim that like 1,700 people have perished there, died. Like they did like torture tactics, like how it was back then. But I did like an overnight tour there, and it was just intense. And the person I was with, like, it got to like, I think it was like 11 p.m. to 7 or something like that, and it was like 3 a.m. And they were like, okay, I don't want to walk around anymore. I want to go to the like place because they had like a little room with like refreshments and stuff, and like it was warm because it was also in winter. And I'm like, I'm not going to sit there. So I literally walked around this place by myself. And this is the type of place that, like, first of all, it's dark. And there's different wings. So you think that, like, it took me so long to find my way back to that place. And I'm walking around, like, getting more, like, scared because I'm just like, I literally can't find my way back. And, like, everywhere I turn is just, like, pitch black. Like, there's just like long hospital looking hallways, you know, so it's just like super creepy. But there was this one room, like they actually have an old morgue there, and like it's still like the tables there and everything, and they're like, if you lay on there, sometimes you'll feel like a little like prick, how they used to like euthanize, or not euthanize, you know, when they do the thing where the person's passed away and they have to like put the stuff through their body. I forget what it's called. Embalming. Yeah, embalming. And I literally laid on there and I felt like a little prick, and I was like, oh my God, I felt it. I felt it.
Oh my God. I cannot with you. I like, this is like, I'm like, no. I feel like we make a really great television duo though, where I'd be like really scared and you'd be like, no, come on.
Oh, literally. We'd make it exciting.
I think we should pitch a reality show where you force me to go on ghost hunts, and I'm really scared the entire time, but I have to keep following you because my other option is to be alone, and I'm not doing that.
Oh my God, that would actually be so much fun though.
I'm gonna be scared the whole time, but I'll feel safe with you. I trust you to take care of me.
Yes, I know what I'm doing. But I got this. I'll protect us.
I mean, you're describing walking through and not being able to find your way, and I mean, worst nightmare. Long hospital-looking hallways. I'm just like, I never in a million years could survive that. I mean, I would just be like, calling for someone to come get me. Where's my life alert button? I need somebody to come get me.
Well, and because like when we started the investigation, because it was like a public ghost tour, so like multiple other groups could go, and like when we started, there was a ton of people there. So when you were investigating, you could actually hear people having conversations. But halfway through, pretty much everyone had gone. So I'm like walking around, like literally like not hearing anything, and it was actually kind of scary because hospital hallways, like in the dark. Hello, like that's terrifying. And then I found my way downstairs, and there was like a coffin and like a little funeral set up and everything. And again, I'm alone, and I'm just like, I gotta go. I got a little bit more scared when I'm alone.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, like, you know, they talk about the fight or flight response, and I'm just like a freeze. I'm a freeze. I'd be like, I'll just wait here till someone finds me, and if I don't move, the spirits of the bad guys won't see me. That's how I react to that situation. I'd be like, frozen in place. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm upset. I didn't know you were such a brave adventure girl when it came to these things. I had no idea. I'm learning so much about you.
It's just like, so, like I said, exhilarating, but also terrifying. It's like addictive. It's like an adrenaline rush. You're just like,
it's when like it's like you're like skydiving. You go on these paranormal investigations.
I actually really want to go skydiving too.
I do not.
The scariest part would be actually getting yourself to jump out of the plane, but once you're out...
That's what I always say. I'm like, I would probably love it, be like howling, laughing. Like when I go on something thrilling, I'm just like screaming, laughing. But I'd have to sign a waiver that says like, I will beg you to not make me do this. I will be saying no with tears in my eyes, but I, strapped to the guy, like, usually you're strapped to someone as a beginner, and they just have to do it. I will sign a waiver that says that.
Yeah, just do it no matter how much I say no.
Just go, no, I've changed my mind. And they have to be, I'll sign it and it says, no, just take her anyways.
Oh my God. And then actually, meanwhile, you're there like, no, I really don't want to go.
I know that about myself. I'd be like, no, I changed my mind. I'd get up there and I'd be like, no. But then I would regret when I got back on the ground not doing it. Like, I know I would have fun flying through the air. Yeah. There's no way I would ever jump out of it.
It seems so thrilling, but also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how like paranormal stuff is too. It's just so like, it's just always drawn me in. Like I was literally that weird kid though that like loved ghosts, loved horror movies. I actually, in my room as a child, instead of having like, dolls, I had like the Chucky doll and like other dolls that were like literally horror movie villains. My friends were like, this is scary. I'm not sleeping over at your house.
They're like, we do not want to do sleepovers at Ariel's house. It's not a sleepover house.
Literally. Oh my gosh, because it was just so, like, I would beg my mom, like, at, like, 6 years old, I was like, can I watch horror movies? Can I please? And she would always say no, and then eventually she was just like, okay, but if you have one nightmare, like, that's it. And she would have to, like, watch the movies before I did, just to make sure, there wasn't too much inappropriate things.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I've just always been into that, like, dark, mysterious sort of thing.
As an adult, I love, but I don't like new horror movies because they're way too realistic and scary. I love old, like, cheesy horror movies where the effects are really bad, so you can tell it's not real, that kind of thing. But as a child, I couldn't watch anything remotely scary, and I definitely couldn't have any doll in my room, let alone a fucking Chucky doll.
Literally, I don't know what's scared of
fully
them.
convinced it was going to come alive. Like, you couldn't have convinced me otherwise. Like, I fully believed in the reality of these situations.
And this was life size, like life size, like not even like a little one, like a full-on size that he would be.
You're like I love watching the there's like, I don't know, there's probably multiple ones, but I get these like reels or TikToks that pop up of like parents like showing their little baby girl that like insisted on having the like demon baby doll from like Spirit Halloween and carrying it around like it's like a normal, and they're just like, this is terrifying. That was you.
Yep, I was that kid.
Like, yep. They're like, let Ariel do what she wants. She's really scary.
Literally. Oh my god. But I just loved it. And I still love horror movies. But I will say, like, once I opened up spiritually, the ones about like spirits and ghosts and possession type of thing, those are a little bit harder. Like, they freak me out more now.
Yeah.
And even sometimes when I'm going into like the locations for investigations, I find that now that I do, like, I am able to sense energy and, you know, I'm psychic, I can actually tell, like, I'll be like, oh, I feel like something is like standing over there, you know, like you feel it type of thing.
Yeah.
But Rolling Hills in particular was where I felt like incredibly sick, like to my stomach, because it's just such a heavy energy. Like all the, like, so there was literally like torture going on there, right? So yeah. But our body really is our biggest tool, like I said, to be able to sense when things are around. Sadie, do you ever have, like, sometimes I'll just be in my room and it's like late at night, maybe I've got like the light off, I'm watching a movie, and I'll just like look somewhere and I'm like, I feel like something is standing right there, and I'm just I'm just like, okay, no, I don't know. I don't want to talk to you right now. And then it kind of goes away. But I feel like that happens like quite often too.
Yeah. I feel like that's what happened to me all the time when I was younger. And maybe, like as an adult, not as much. But I also had really bad, like sleep paralysis. With like where my eyes would open and I would be like dreaming, but I would see stuff. And it was, and again, like, I don't know. Is this just my dream? Because that's what's sleep paralysis with night terrors. Night terrors. So again, this could be my brain, or this could have been something. But this happened when I was like a teenager and in my early 20s, where like my eyes would open and I would see things in my room. And I have really bad vision, so it's all very blurry, but I would hear things. But I'd be completely frozen. I couldn't move at all, and I couldn't breathe. And I would hear myself trying to breathe and trying to like, and it would be like so spooky because it'd be like I can't breathe. And I remember one time, I saw a figure walking across my room, and I was confused. So I was trying to say mom, like asking if it was, you know, like, mom, like, who is that? And it was while I was packing for college, so I knew my room had lots of stuff on the ground, and to me it sounded like someone was like walking across like plastic. It was like their footsteps were like staticky or something. And so my brain, and you know, this is probably a few seconds, but my brain's trying to comprehend, so I can hear myself trying to say mom, but it's like coming out like I can't say it because I have no breath and I'm completely paralyzed. And then when I wake up fully after a few seconds, everything just goes away, but I'm sitting there terrified. But it was always like demons. My whole life I've had trouble with this, so I don't know what that means about me. But that's how my night terrors manifested, was there was like demons. The first ever time it happened, I thought I was possessed, and I slept with my rosary for like a year. Like, I would fall asleep with my rosary, and this I grew up Catholic, so I had like these like things gifted from my grandparents and stuff, and I had this like Mother Mary, like just her head, like little figurine, and that was on my bedside, and I would be clutching my rosary. And my mom also taught me about this is the root chakra hand mudra, but she taught me that closes off your energy and protects you. So I literally had my rosary through my fingers, falling asleep, clutching my fingers like this, visualizing my guardian angel around me, and I was just terrified. So I don't know.
Did it work? Because you had that strong belief?
I think so. I mean, like, I had them less often as I would do that. Like, they would be spread apart. I feel like whenever I relaxed those things where I was like, oh, I feel safe again, and then it would happen again. That's the thing where I'm like, what is this? So a lot of mystery there. But
Yeah.
that was in my second house. So I'm like, is it me? Am I just an attractor of these, as a child at least? Not anymore. This doesn't happen. Was I just an attractor of these things? I don't know. But I also struggled with, grew up Catholic, and I struggled with a lot of just like Catholic trauma from that, thinking I was bad, thinking that just strange things that I took. And so it could again be like a manifestation of my thoughts, but becoming real around me. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's there's things to unpack there, but I had
The
these
Catholic trauma though, like that's legit, you know, like I also grew up Catholic, and even just being into this stuff, like it kind of makes you feel, right? You're like, oh, am I going to get possessed or like something crazy like that? Safe to say I've never been possessed. But yeah, like you do have all of this trauma just associated with like your behaviors and like how you're moving through life, right? Because like, you know, religion tells you that you should be a certain way. There's so much trauma around religion. But interestingly enough about sleep paralysis. So there's actually a documentary. It used to be on Netflix. It's not anymore, but it's called Nightmare, and it's all about sleep paralysis. And they said in there that if you talk to people about sleep paralysis, they can actually like get it. Like, yeah. And I'm just like, oh, it's fascinating, but it kind of shows how like our brain can literally be so influenced by these things. Because I mean, at the heart of sleep paralysis, it's like your body has awoken, but your brain hasn't, or maybe it's the reverse of that. One of those things. But I think that we're in such a perceptive state that we literally can't move, and we're literally seeing things around us, which makes it even more terrifying. Some people also say that they get like someone actually like sitting on their chest, like they feel like someone's actually.
I've had that. Somebody on my chest, like a little. Again, to me, it was like a little demon sitting on my chest.
Yeah. Terrifying.
I mean, crazy. And then like, so it happens at the point, like, I feel like everyone's experienced this at least once. You know, when you're falling asleep and all of a sudden you feel like you're falling and you go, and you kind of like wake up. That's when sleep paralysis happens. So you go, but your body doesn't wake up, but your brain wakes up. So it only happens as you're falling asleep.
So you would wake up like in a jolt kind of thing? Like you'd like be jolted awake?
Not necessarily, like kind of, but not the same. But that's how I would describe it, is like those times when you feel like you're falling, and then you wake up. It's like that moment. It's like that swoop of coming back into awareness, but your body doesn't catch up, or like you're like, I don't know how to describe it. But one thing I learned. So this is what's interesting. So I finally told my mom what happened, because I was so scared. I didn't want to. I always kept everything to myself. I thought if I said it out loud, it would make it real. I finally told my mom, and she was like, oh my God, that happened to me as a teenager. And I thought I was abducted by aliens. And she was like, for like 20 years, I was fully convinced I was abducted by aliens. And she's like, I still kind of think I was because it feels so real. But it is not uncommon. I guess it's common in like your teens and like early 20s. But I had never heard of it before, but my mom told me, she's like, oh my God, that used to happen to me. I was fully convinced I have been abducted by aliens for years and years and years before I ever told anybody about it. But a tip for anyone that experiences it now, for me at least, it happens only if I used to fall asleep on my back. And if I sleep on my side, it does not happen usually. It happened to me once on my side, but I don't know what it is about falling asleep on the back, but my mom taught me that trick and it always worked.
Good tip. I literally always sleep on my back. Now I'm like, oh God, I don't want that to happen to me.
No, it's not going to happen to you. It was a teenage thing for me mostly, so you don't have to worry about it. But, okay, there's one, I want to talk about one more thing with Ariel, moving out of the paranormal stuff, which we love talking about forever, but you're also a shadow work guide. And I know like people first coming into spirituality, or even if you've been on your spiritual journey for a while, I feel like the concept of shadow work, it's sort of a buzzy word, and it can kind of have some nuance around it. Like, what does it mean? How do I do it? How often do I do it? Do I have to do it? Like, I'm curious, like, how did you get into shadow work? And I think it's interesting that you do these paranormal investigations. You're connecting with maybe the shadowier side of the spirit world, and you're also a shadow work guide. So tell us a little bit about how you got into shadow work and sort of like how you would explain it to somebody who wants to know more about it.
Yeah, and I think that I was always just destined to like be in the
Yeah.
shadows, like exploring that, because I have always, like I said, been drawn to like the dark, mysterious side of things. And, growing up, I experienced like my own, trauma that we kind of go through in our families and stuff. And essentially, it kind of really made me repress all of my emotions. And I thought, like, literally, I was like, something's wrong with me. Like, I literally was like, I felt like this like negative force was like over me. I couldn't like feel
Yeah.
things in a way that I like other people would tell me things, like even just something like, oh, this person passed away. They'd be like crying and I'd be like, I don't feel anything. But then if I was like alone in my room, I would like allow the emotions to like flow, but I wouldn't, like I was just so like closed, and I went
Yeah.
through life that way. Yeah, and I went through life that way, and I used, I went into like a partying phase. I used like substances, people to really find like any feeling, basically.
Yeah. I went through
And
that
I
phase
just,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And it's such a like real phase for so many of us because we just like push things down. It's also, I feel like people just weren't really like, it was kind of told like, oh, don't express your emotions. Like you should just be able to deal with them on your own. Like that type
Yeah.
of understanding that a lot
We're
of us
not
had. So
taught
we
about
suppressed
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not taught the tools like at all. So actually, when I had my spiritual awakening, which was brought on by like a really strong loss that I had, it was actually my kitty. I had never really experienced like a huge loss, and he was like literally my best friend. Like, and he died like tragically and like traumatically, like suddenly. It was very traumatic.
Oh.
But I literally like my heart just like cracked wide open, and that's when I had my spiritual awakening, and everything just kept flooding in. And when you have that awakening, and you're just like, you can't describe it, but you just have a knowing of like everything, and you're like, this all makes sense now. Like the universe makes sense. Why didn't it before?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to religion, because I always had like, heaven and hell, that type of understanding. I always had a disconnect with that. I was like, I don't think that we just die and
Same.
then we just go up to heaven and only the people that have died are there. Like, I always more so resonated with like reincarnation. And when I had my awakening, I was like, oh, this all makes sense. Like everything just like made sense, right? And I was like, why didn't I find this
Yeah.
earlier? So then I started like going into like, okay, well, I still have these like traumas and I still have these triggers and I'm still acting out in ways, and I want to like learn how I can change that. So I just went on a deep dive. I also am very interested in psychology. So when I went to university, I had like a minor or a concentration in psychology. So I'm really interested in like the human brain and Carl Jung and, all of that. And
Yes.
yeah, so I started diving in and learning more about that. And then I came across shadow work and I was like, okay, because therapy was never something that I could do. Like actually my mom tried to take me to therapy one time because I was having like a lot of like behavioral issues, and I was just like, no, I'm not talking to this person. Like I don't even know them. So I just like completely shut off. And then I was like, I need to dive in on my own. So
Yeah.
I learned and I started doing the modalities, and now I feel like a completely different person. Like shadow work literally changed my life.
Yeah. I resonate with that really deeply. I think therapy is so great for the people that it works for, but I like I'm the same way. Like I guess I don't know, maybe it's having like a lot of earth and fire energy, but like I have a hard time like using words to express like what I'm going through. I recently uncovered a trauma of mine where as a child I like made a resolution to never bother my parents because I saw them stressed. And so I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. I've always had a hard time like burdening somebody else with what I'm going through, and I keep everything to me. But I find that that's why I love being a witch, because through ritual, through being able to write instead of speak, through like embodiment movements, like literally like shaking my ass when I'm angry and just being like,
Yeah.
like there's so many ways that we can like channel these things through. And so anyone listening, like if you feel like you've tried talk therapy or you're in it and you've like reached a wall, or it just doesn't resonate with you like it seems to for everybody else, like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world to explore. And they also work great. I have so many clients that we work together and and they also have their therapist, which is like my favorite thing ever, because I'm like, yes, like these pair together so beautifully. But I'm curious, like, what are some of your favorite modalities of shadow work?
Yeah, and I just want to touch on too something you said. Like therapy is amazing, right? For people who can express themselves. I, like you, never was able to. I just like it's almost like it was put me in too vulnerable of a position that I wasn't willing to like go there with a random person. And I
Yeah.
wanted to find ways to like, do it myself. So what was really impactful for me, so I like that you brought up embodiment, because that was one of the biggest things that actually brought me into my body, because again, I wasn't able to like feel things to a certain extent. Like it just like was there was just disconnect with like my body and like feeling. So I started actually doing intuitive dance, and that actually really, really helped me, because you literally just like put on music, close your eyes, and just allow your body to move, and you're really releasing the energy, right?
Yeah.
But more than that, I found like shadow journaling was probably one of the biggest things for me, because I was able to just journal out, like when you're journaling, especially when it comes to shadow work, it's easier to start with the things you're already like aware of, right? Because as you start to dive in, that's when more like hidden or unconscious things will come up. But it's hard to just sit there and like name off what is like quote unquote wrong with you, right? Or that you need to heal or that you need to integrate. So I started with like my biggest wounds and my core traumas that I was aware of, and I started journaling, and that also led me into like forgiveness rituals, which were also really helpful. Some of which I actually learned from you, Sadie, like the Ho'oponopono prayer, because I took Quantum Goddess with Sadie. So you taught me that in the Ho'oponopono, and that was really, really impactful. And also my witchcraft journey too. Again, Sadie was a huge point in this. Like I remember you saying something one time. I had joined your like Witchcraft 101 course, like before we actually had connected. And you were like, if you feel like you're a witch, then you're a witch. And I was like, yes, because I was always into like all the magical Harry Potter, like all of that. Like I just like wanted to be a witch so bad. So that too, like just come in, basically finding out about yourself, uncovering deeper layers of yourself, was really impactful for me. So I would say anyone starting out is like shadow journaling, forgiveness rituals, especially if your trauma is linked to like somebody else. But you can also do forgiveness ritual with yourself. Even just something as like cathartic as burning and releasing, that type of ritual where you're writing it out and then burning, because it's just such a release. It's really about like almost like tricking your brain into releasing these things. But more than that, it's also about rewriting the narrative that you tell yourself, right? Because we grow up believing these things so strongly about ourselves that it becomes just our reality. And then we look at other people being their embodied, authentic selves, and we're like, well, why can't I be like that? But you can. It's just you're actually stopping yourself from being able to step into that energy. So almost like being really gentle with yourself, giving yourself that grace. But there are things that shadow work, like it's not a one size fits all. If you're dealing with something really, really traumatic or really challenging, you may not be able to dive into shadow work like on your own. You may need somebody to support you, because it may not be safe for you to bring up those deep, deep rooted traumas. But it can be really empowering to dive in and start to just uncover those layers of yourself. But I realized I didn't answer your question about like, what is shadow work? So essentially it is really just a form of spiritual therapy that allows you to uncover like those repressed desires, even just like undesirable traits about yourself that you've pushed down. Basically anything that is in your subconscious or unconscious mind is going to be a shadow trait. That's also some positive things too. So it's not always just negative. And the concept of shadow work is really just integrating, embracing, showing those parts of yourself acceptance. Because when we push them away, we don't do ourselves any favors, right? We're actually just distancing ourselves from this trait. Whereas if we embraced it and we integrated it, we actually won't hold as much guilt or shame around that. And we can also own up to our behaviors a little bit easier. Like I've noticed on my shadow work journey, now when I get triggered, I'm able to easily identify it as a trigger. And then I can like, we're human, guys. Like we're human. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to go through shadow work and then never act out or do anything like bad again. Like you're going to have moments. But now I can like give myself grace. And if I lash out at somebody else, I can say, listen, I'm sorry. Like I was triggered. Whereas before I would just be like, I'm in the right, like I would always just like be in that energy. So
I think that's huge. I think like like shadow work is taking personal responsibility for, and again, it's not all about like the quote bad parts of us or the undesirable, like you said the word undesirable. Nothing's bad or good, but it's like, oh, like I'm responsible for my shit. I'm responsible when I'm feeling reactive, when I'm feeling triggered. I'm responsible for all of that. And that's so empowering, and it's hard at first, but now it's like, like it doesn't mean I'm never reactive. Like sometimes I like, am short and reactive and emotional with my boyfriend, but I after the fact, I go, let me go talk to him and explain to him, like, look, I'm sorry, like, this specific thing is something I've always had trouble with, or I always get really reactive about this thing. I'm working on it. It might happen again, but I'm really aware and I'm really sorry that happened. You know, like, and it's just like, it's so empowering. Or I could just sit there and be mad for 3 days like I used to and be like, they did this, they did this, they did this to piss me off. And they don't, like, it's something that, like, well, how would they know that would piss me off? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's so powerful for not only our relationship to self and offering ourselves compassion and love, but like, it's so healing for our relationships too. And I think it just ripples out so beautifully of like, you're really, it's just that awareness. You're really aware when something is your own shit and when something is someone else's. And you also have compassion for their shadow too. I think that's a big gift where you're like, okay, I see that in you. And I know it's not about me. And also I know when I'm being reactive and it's not about you, it's about me. Like, we're all just, it's all this interconnected and like, you know, like, yeah, sometimes I fuck up. Sometimes I'm not a good friend or sometimes I'm not a good partner, but, I'm a human. And I think shadow work is just being able to be an observer and be curious about it rather than punish ourselves for it or punish somebody else too. It's really powerful. Yeah.
Well, and those are some of the main ways too. Like if you're just starting out and you don't want to do like a deep dive, it's like meditation is great just for being able to like get that clarity as well as like silence your mind. Because when we don't have that groundedness, we can be like, we can go into spirals, like thought spirals, like it can bring us to some dark places. But it's really important. Meditation, if that's not your thing, you can also do journaling. But also, like you said, Sadie, I love that you brought up being a curious observer because you can observe your thoughts and not hold judgment toward them. That's the most important part too, is like being non-judgmental and understanding like, this is an aspect of myself. I do have the power to actually heal this and start to integrate it. But I'm never going to, it's not that I'm never going to slip up. Like we're human at the end of the day. And I think it's really important that like our external reality is a manifestation of our internal reality. So like how we feel, even just about others. Like if I was going out into society being like, oh, everyone is just so annoying, like I'm going to actually experience that when I go out. But if I go out and I'm just like, I'm going to have a good day. Somebody could be rude to me and I'll still just be like, oh, well, they were probably having a bad day. But if I went out thinking that everyone's going to be like that, then I could be like, I could go home then and be like, oh my God, this person, you can't even believe what they said to me, and just ruminate on that as opposed to just like understanding that like that probably with how they acted to me had nothing to do with me and it was about them.
Exactly.
You know, and it's just about like moving through that process and giving ourselves grace. And Carl Jung actually said something along the lines of like, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life and you will call it fate. So we have a lot more power in this as well than we think we do. You know, there are cases where things happen for us, you know, the universe just puts things in our path, but there's also things that we directly create because of like the beliefs that we have that we haven't worked through. So it's really empowering. And honestly, you just like feel free. Like when you start to work through these things, there's like a sense of freedom. So yeah, I recommend it to like literally everyone because we all have some semblance of shadow, like every single one of us.
Yes. It's really interesting because I've seen a couple different like reels pop up saying how like one was that was talking about astrologers and one was talking about psychics, but both of them saying basically the same message of somebody who is on the spiritual path is much harder to give them a reading, is much harder to make predictions from an astrological perspective and as a psychic, because they are very conscious, they are very aware, and so they are conscious creators. And so it's when somebody is more like closed off to their spiritual self, they are at the mercy of, like you said, like fate. That quote, they're much more predictable. It's much easier to tap into, this is where you're headed because you're following the rules that have formed in your subconscious mind. Whereas when you're on this journey and you're doing shadow work and you're opening up and you're taking personal responsibility, well, then you are, I have chills right now, but you are truly open to infinite possibilities. And so it becomes much harder you know, I actually feel like I've experienced that where when I first started my spiritual journey and I barely dipped my toes into the water of any of this work, psychic readings were mind blowing. And now when I get them, I'll receive amazing messages from my mom through somebody, whatever, but I'm just like, they're not as predictive. They're not as, and I've noticed that, and it's not because they're excellent psychics. They're powerful. They're amazing at what they do. It's because I've become much more empowered on this journey, and because psychics are tapping into, like our universe is all made up of math, and we are tapping into the mathematical, the likelihood of something playing out a certain way. And so it's very interesting, and I saw multiple videos about that where it's just like, yeah, like spiritual people, it's much harder to read for them because they're unpredictable. They're really tapped into infinite possibility. They could go back into their shadow side and into their old programming at any moment, but they're also really open, and they're conscious creators, and they're fucking aware of what's going on. And so it's really hard to predict where that's going to go. And I was like, damn, that's badass. That's manifestation, is just full awareness and being like, I could let this ruin my whole day, or I could let this ruin my friendship, or I could let this ruin my relationship, or I could just be consciously aware and take personal responsibility and do what I can, what's in my power, and see, where things move forward from here. So I just thought that was fucking cool. I was like, yeah, it is harder to read us.
I love that. Or when you do get a reading, you go like, oh yeah, I knew that. Like it's just like an immediate, right?
It's much more like validation versus like mind blowing, like, how did you know that about me? Or like, it's really funny. It's very different. And I'm curious if anyone's listening and has had that experience, because I know everyone here's on their spiritual journeys too, where you're just like, oh my God, yeah, like it hits totally differently once you're on this path for a while. You become less predictable because you're so powerful, and you could change your mind. You can form a new whole path, life story at any given moment because you're aware of how powerful you are. It's so cool.
Well, we forget that sometimes, like just the power that we do have. And sometimes we become like a victim to circumstance, and we just think, oh, this is just how it is. Like everything just happens to me. And that's how I used to be, like before I dove into shadow work. But it's so just like empowering. And I think what's important too is that people, like, your journey never ends. Okay, like there's some people that do one bout of shadow work and then they're just like, oh, I'm totally healed and now I just never have to. And then they actually start having like a lot of triggers, but they're not aware of them. And it's like, no, you have to be continuously open, because you might think that you healed that thing, and then, months later it pops up with a vengeance and you're like, oh, I thought I was done with you, and then you're literally
layers we're working through.
You're like peeling back the layers of the onion, like we're so... There's literally like years, especially if you're in like 30s or whatever, there's decades, right, worth of trauma that you were literally working through, and self-limiting beliefs and conditioning and all of that. So, that's not going to go away like after one session of shadow work. But it's also just about devoting to yourself, that like, I'm in this to like become the best version of myself that I can possibly be, not just for me, but also for like my relationships, my future goals, future children, maybe, like, everything. You're trying to become that best version, just to have like your most authentic self being expressed, but also to have like the most joyous and fulfilling life that you can while you have this time on earth. So like I said, I recommend it to like literally every single person. And when you start out on your spiritual journey, like you start thinking, because you're diving into this, that everyone else should, and you start to actually identify like what they should be dealing with. I had to actually rear myself back, because I'm like, these people might not be ready to like dive in, right? But we're so excited about our journey and about our growth that we want to share it with everybody, but we don't understand how that can actually be perceived by someone who's like, nah, like I'm not ready to dive into that. Yeah. So that's another learning curve that I had to go through, is like pulling myself back and not sharing what everybody else should be dealing with, and just focusing on myself.
That can be so hard, because you see it in your family, maybe siblings, parents, you see it in your friends, and you're like, no, you just have to lead by example. You have to do your thing, and they'll ask you about it when they're ready. Like that's what I found, is they go, you seem happier, or like, oh wow, you've really stuck with this thing, or whatever. Can you tell me more about that? And then you've got the invite, and then it's time. But I think like, especially like if your partner isn't on board, especially if you're like living together, it can be hard. I think that's the hardest one that I get questions about a lot. And it's like, just lead by example. Let them, tell them like, oh, I'm going to go do my meditation, or oh, I'm going to go do my journaling. And when they're ready to ask about it, when they see a difference in you and your light and your radiance and the way that you're moving through your day-to-day with them, they'll ask when they're ready. Like, you can't force it on anybody. They go,
No.
why would I want to journal about what I don't like, what I'm, what the bad stuff in my life, or, my like go-to is a rant journal entry where I just like pour all the negative thoughts in my head out on paper. If I'm discouraged or frustrated, or I'm like, gosh, this negative self-talk is in my brain today, and just get it out. And then try to
rip it up after?
Yeah, like rip it up or burn it after, and just try to like, a lot of times I'll turn it, like I'll like flip it into like an EFT tapping script for myself. So I like to tap on like the negative, the quote negative stuff first, and kind of like say that, and then always replace it with positive intention, go forward. So I love a rant journaling sesh where I pour out my negative thoughts on paper, and then I'll turn it into like an EFT tapping script and like do that for a few days. And that feels so good. That's one of my favorite go-tos that I do.
Well, I love that, Sadie, because earlier on, like when I had first started my page, I had posted something around turning a self-limiting belief into an affirmation can be really empowering too, where it's like you have this belief about yourself that, like you said, quote unquote negative, that we can switch it into a positive and then actually use that as like an affirmation or a mantra that we're going to say daily, because that can be really empowering too. You're like taking control of these beliefs you have about yourself. Because like, every single one of us has things about ourselves that we know we could change, or maybe we don't like, or maybe we don't want to face. And it's important to like come to terms with those and actually accept them and show them love, because at the end of the day, they're going to be part of you regardless, right? Like all of your experiences are part of you. That doesn't make you worse of a human, better of a human, but it is up to you to take responsibility for them and to start like working towards, relieving yourself of being like tied down by those things, essentially.
Yeah. And it can be like intimidating. It's like sunny out, but it's like raining. I love when that happens. Magical. Us releasing. Let the light in. Cleansing away. But yeah, it can be like overwhelming work. It can be intimidating work. When I start working with one-on-one clients, a lot of times they'll say like, we'll trace a feeling back into like a specific memory and like do healing around that one memory. And they'll say, oh, this seems like I have a lot of work to do. I have so many memories we're going to have to go back to. And it's like, you actually don't have to heal every memory. You can do this on your own. You can do this with a guide, like both of us. But like when you go into like a handful of these, that ripples through your entire timeline. And like you get to peel back an entire one of those layers, and you find so much more lightness and relief. And like a lot of times that kind of ripples out into some of those other memories, where if you think about the time that happened and everything that came after that, you've done healing for that too, because that healing ripples through the timeline. So it's really powerful, and you never have to uncover every single limiting belief or uncover every memory that as a child you experienced some sort of grief or trauma or discomfort. Like, we never have to get into all of it before we begin to like experience the benefits of it and start manifesting easier and just enjoy life more and just be less reactive and more present. Like the gift of shadow work happens that first session, and then you get to just keep like slowly expanding into it. It's so powerful. So I love that that's one of the big themes of the work you do. It's really important work.
Yes, well, thank you. I think like the first step of healing is self-awareness. Like truly, you just have to have an awareness of what you want to heal. And I love that you brought up that you don't have to heal every single thing, because it's not, what you're here to do, but it is, you are here to take accountability and accept yourself as a whole, good, bad, and the ugly, bring it all in and show it that love and compassion. And I think like it is just such important work, and it can be life-changing. Truly. I am a testament to that. Sadie's a testament to that, like we do the work, and we're also healing generational trauma too. So like keep that in mind as well. It's not always just our stuff.
Exactly.
But there's lots of things that are going to come up, and when you do start, things just come up, and what is meant to be healed comes up and presents itself to you so that you can gain that clarity and continue moving on. But it's just, it's really powerful work. So
it really is. So let us know how we can work with you. Where can we find you? Where can we work with you on some of this juicy shadow work magic? what have you got going on? Tell the listeners, tell me.
I would love to. So you guys can find me over on Instagram primarily at Enchanted by Spirit. So I do a couple different things. I have shadow work readings where if you're just kind of looking for someone to bring forth your shadow traits, like maybe you're not really sure what you should begin healing, that's a perfect first step. I also do cord cutting rituals where if you do have an energetic attachment to anything, whether that be a person, a self-limiting belief, an experience, a trauma of some kind, I can help you to remove those cords energetically. I do like a candle magic ritual for you, and then I kind of intuitively download everything that's coming through and give you a recording of that. And then I'm actually working right now on a shadow work self-paced course. So stay tuned for that. If anyone kind of wants to do this on their own, isn't really ready to take the step to, hire a mentor or have someone guide them, you can do this, and it'll kind of be like dropped weekly, where there'll be just lots of juicy goodness about shadow work, how to begin diving in, practical steps as well. I'm somebody who really needs practical steps in my work, because sometimes in the spiritual community you hear words and you're like, okay, but how do I do that? Like, you're saying this, but how do I do it? So I like to give you a practical step-by-step guide. And then I'll also soon at some point be launching some one-on-one sessions where we can actually dive into shadow work together, or anything that you're currently dealing with that you need support around. Like I said, I view spirituality and psychology as hand in hand. And I think that in order to move through things, we need to have an understanding of like the way our brain works and the way that trauma is processed through our body, so that we can actually begin to heal it. So that's kind of what I've got going on right now. And then of course, stay tuned for more paranormal investigations as well. Yes, I'm hoping this September we'll have a lot more coming up where we can put out some more YouTube videos. Again, Boo Babes on YouTube. But yeah, so that's what's going on with me. If you're interested in the course or the one-on-one sessions, feel free to send me a DM and I can put you on the list so that once they're out, you'll be one of the first to know. But yeah, thank you so much, Sadie, for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you. And I'll make sure all of the links are in the show notes. So if you're ready to run to Ariel's page, just go to the show notes. It'll be linked there. But thank you. Oh my God, this was so fun. I love talking ghost stories. And then shadow work is just, it's such a big part of my mission too. So it was really special to get to talk about that together. So thank you for sharing your magic. And Rebel Witches, we'll see you next week. Bye everyone. Oh, my big thumb.